In this video, you learn how to mute strings on the guitar to avoid unwanted noise infiltrating your guitar playing. Now, this is one of those techniques that is so important to getting a good sound on the guitar, a good, clean guitar sound. Yes, so many people either ignore this or are just simply unaware of the noise or the background kind of noise that occurs if you don't mute strings when playing guitar. Hi, this is Simon Candy from Acoustic Guitar Lessons Online.net, and in today's video, we're going to look at the string muting technique. We're going to look at it when you're playing chords as well as when you're playing riffs and lines. Now, naturally, when you play guitar, of course, the focus is largely on sounding your notes nice and clear and clean, and this is good, of course. However, if that's all you do, you're going to find that there are sounds that come into your playing, sort of string noise if you like, around the notes that you're playing if you don't also pay attention to muting certain strings out. So that is what we're on about today. We're going to look at various different playing situations and the things that we need to focus on in terms of string muting so that we can get a good clean sound without the sort of background noise. So let's get into it. Let's begin with chords. So of course, when you're playing your chords, you want the notes of the chord to sound nice and clear, right? But there are, in some situations, notes or strings that you don't want sounding. For example, let's have a look at the good old power chord. So if I have, for example, a D power chord here stemming from the 5th fret on the 5th string, this is all well and good to play the power chord, but when you play power chords, you really typically playing them quite aggressively and really attacking the chord. And if you're not muting strings out, you're going to get all these open strings ringing through, or at least one or two of those strings ringing through. So when you play a power chord stemming from the 5th string, this first finger basically does most of the muting. The first finger there, my index, is playing the root note, but there's enough of the padding of the finger on this side of the string to also just touch the bottom string. I don't want to be on top of the bottom string because I'll end up sounding the 5th fret on the bottom string. I just want it touching the underside of the string, so that's the sound I hear if I isolate that string. Then that same index finger blocks all the 4th, 3rd, 2nd and 1st strings on top as well. So I could strum all 6 strings and only get one note sounding. That's what you want. And then this 3rd finger just comes in and plays the A note, 7th fret on the 4th string, and it might naturally block out a couple of strings too, or probably just the 3rd string there, just for extra insurance that you're not going to get those strings ringing through. And then you can really attack the chord without hearing additional notes. Now, if you've got a power chord on the 6th string, same deal with the index finger and the 3rd finger, but of course there's no note below the root note to mute out there. But you still want to mute those top notes. Now, if we've got like a bar chord, it's very similar, like a root 5 bar chord. We want to block out the bottom string again, but we want to sound strings 4, 3, and 2, and then we want to block out that top string. So naturally you might find that 3rd finger, whilst it can sound the notes on strings 4, 3, 2, it'll block that top one out. That's good, that's what we want, okay? And then we can really attack that chord and not worry about any notes ringing through. Open chords. Now, anytime I play, for example, a C chord, I'm sounding all the notes of the C chord here, but the 3rd finger is like the 1st finger was for the power chord here. The 3rd finger, the flesh of the 3rd finger, the padding there, is just over the string, so there's enough of it to just get the underside of the bottom string again. And so when I strum a C chord, I don't hear the low drone of an open E string. If I didn't mute that out, you hear that low E string. Now, it's not the worst sound in the world because there is an E note in a C chord, but that's a very low E note and it is muddy and does not sound good. Plus, you probably want to hear it from the root here anyway, okay? So with the C chord, it's just one string you're muting out with the 3rd finger. If I had like a D chord, okay, I got my, from my 4th string, my thumb is just gonna touch the bottom string. So this time, because I don't have a finger close enough, anywhere near close enough to the bottom string to mute it out, I'll use the thumb of my fretting hand just to touch it. and then I can strum. This A string is in the chord and isn't muddy like the E was for the C chord. It's not bad, so you can play that if you want. Having said that, you might be able to just sort of target the string anyway. Okay, so you might not necessarily have to hit the bottom string here, but if you do, it's covered. Okay, and it depends on what you're doing as to whether you do hit that string or not. Another example, let's say we've got a little F chord here. Same sort of deal. I would use my third finger to block the A string out, and maybe you can target just maybe that's enough on this, on the lower side of the root note to kind of give you a little bit of a cushion there to not hit any other strings, but I'd probably just have my thumb touching that string as well. The other thing to consider is that when you're plugged in and amplified, even if you don't hit certain strings, if they're kind of left open, you're not muting them out, they can just kind of ring out with the overtones of other notes and create noise anyway. So you don't even necessarily have to hit the string for it to ring through and create this sort of noise in the background. If I'm playing an A chord, same deal, I block it out with my thumb. Okay, so there's a couple of examples of muting strings out when playing chords. It makes all the difference for a really nice, crisp, clean and clear sound. Now, octave shapes are very common to play on guitar, and when you play octave shapes, you've got to mute strings out. So, for example, I can play an octave shape here at the 5th position. I'm going to play a D note again on my 5th fret, and I'm going to play the octave of the D on the 7th fret of the 3rd string. So naturally, there's a string in between, and if you don't mute that out, you're going to get that note sound in. Now, it's probably more natural for you to mute that out. You might find you just mute that anyway without even trying. That's a good thing. But don't push too hard, because then you'll end up sounding the note on the string in between, which is not a bad sound, but you're not getting the octave, the pure octave there. So you want to mute the string out, and that's achieved with that first finger. But it's also going to mute out, like it did on the power chord, the bottom string, and the 3rd finger can mute out the 2nd string, but it's also covered with this first finger. So this index finger, you want to make sure you don't bar, you don't want to overexert the pressure on the finger, because you're going to end up sounding some notes. But it's just touching the top string. So like it was with the power chord, it's the same position. You can have that first finger sounding that D note as well as muting the other strings. But now we want to add the octave. Often when you're playing octaves, you're really strumming out whatever you're doing. If you've got an octave on the bottom string from the 6th string, and then the octave up on the 7th fret of the 4th string, same deal, just no note to mute out below the root, but you've got the note in between and you've got the notes on top. So you want to be able to mute those out as well. We have octave shapes that you can extend from the 4th string. So for example, if I have my G here on the 5th fret, string 4, the octave is now going to be an extra fret higher because of the different tuning of the 3rd to 2nd string. So it's going to be at the 8th fret on the 2nd string. So there is your octave. Now we have the pinky can block out the top string. When it's fretting the 8th fret, it's also blocking out the top string. The first finger, again, the index, is blocking the string in between. It's also blocking the top string, so there's added insurance there that the top string is not going to ring through. And the index blocks out the 4th. Now that might be enough, but we've also got this bottom string, and we don't have a finger, not one that's playing the octave here, close to get that. So I would use probably my 2nd finger here, and I'd just lightly touch it on the bottom string. So then I can mute it out. And if I went to the top, same deal, it'd just mute out the lower 2 strings here. You can also get a little bit of, not talking about palm muting here, this sort of thing. We're not talking about that, but the palm of the hand can kind of just dampen down on the string there too, just to lessen any impact of sound that might come if you hit that string. So there's a little bit of help from your picking hand as well. Let's talk single note playing. So when we're playing single notes, riffs and solos and things like that, we don't want to be just right on our fingertips when we're playing, because we're going to leave all these strings open and ready to ring out, even if we don't hit them, but particularly when we hit them too. So when I'm playing like with my first finger, for example, if I'm just playing playing a little riff here in the pentatonic scale, that first finger, while it's playing the C note there, 5th fret on the 3rd string, it's bending at the knuckle. I'm not going to be completely flat fingered here, but it's not completely on the fingertip like it might be if I'm playing a chord. It's bent at the knuckles, but it's also, again, there's part of the finger padding is just touching the underside of the string below, and part of the finger padding here is also blocking out the top or the string above it, and possibly the top string too, actually, in that case. Okay, so if I'm using my 3rd finger, same sort of thing. It's going to play the note that I'm targeting. It's bending at the knuckle joints there, but it's also touching the string below for the most part. I'm just thinking in the Mr. Plane if I do that. And I do. Sometimes I might have, if I'm using my 3rd finger, sometimes I'll use 1 or 2 of the fingers behind the 1st and 2nd fingers just to kind of mute noise out too. So I think there's a lot of things going on that I'm not even aware of necessarily. It's so automatic now. But certainly with the 3rd finger, it's going to block out strings either side of the string you're on, the note that you're playing. Okay, but I think also maybe these fingers here kind of certainly they're going to be kind of around the strings just to block out any unwanted noise as well. So it does take a lot of focus, and you might think, how am I going to be able to think of all of that when I'm playing? It's hard enough just to play the notes that I'm targeting. But these things that you really put your focus to and pull apart into little pieces to really focus on become automatic. You won't even think about it. That's why I've really got to think about it now as I'm explaining it to you, to try and convey what is actually going on. So basically when I'm using my fingers, I'm playing the note, but I'm also muting the string below and above that note that I'm playing. Also, I use my thumb of my picking hand to mute strings below the note that I'm playing. So if I'm playing this 3rd fretted note or something, on this string set here, this thumb is just resting on the lower string. So when I play, the thumb is just resting, if you can see there, on the lower strings. So for example, when I'm playing on this 3rd string, the thumb is resting down on the lower string. So it mutes out those notes. If I'm playing on the higher strings, the thumb ends up muting more strings. Okay, that's the thumb muting technique. I used to use my palm to do that. As I played on the higher strings, the palm of my hand mutes the lower strings. That's another option there. I went to this way because it was more efficient. My pick moves much more efficiently, smaller pick motions, than if I'm like that. So I made a change there. You can decide for yourself. That's not so much what this video is about, but it's just part of my picking hand also mutes out strings around the notes that I play when I'm playing single notes. Bending notes. If I'm bending. Now, same sort of thing. You can see my thumb over the top there just to kind of get the power under the bend, but it can also then block out strings below. And quite often, if I'm bending and I want to release, I don't want to hear this sound, where I catch one of the strings releasing the bend. We don't want to hear that. So to prevent that, you can bend, and when you go to release it, my pick is just on the underside of the string below the one that I'm bending. So I'm bending the 2nd string here. So once I've bent it and I'm going to release it, my pick goes to the underside of the 3rd string, and I can release that bend without the 3rd string sounding. Get a nice clean sound. Let me give you an example of a riff where this sort of thing comes into play. So Chili Peppers, what's it called? Can't Stop, right? It goes like this. So you're not going to play a riff like that if you can't mute strings out, okay? Because it's not going to sound the same. You really need to attack it. If you're just going to, doesn't have the same feel, right? The same attack. If you're just really careful with the notes that you're playing, you've got to really be able to play those notes while muting out all the other strings. So, when I'm playing with my index finger, which is doing quite a bit of work there on the root notes, it's muting out all those strings like it was with the octave shapes and the power chord. Also things like bluesy sort of stuff, right? You've really got to attack it. If you like this video, you'll love this ebook complete with video examples called 10 melodic fingerpicking patterns you can learn in 10 minutes or less. Do you struggle to make the fingerpicking patterns you learn on guitar sound like music? Perhaps it's because you believe in one or more of these fingerpicking pattern myths. 1. You need to know a lot of patterns to have your fingerpicking sound musical. 2. Only advanced fingerpicking patterns sound musical. Easy patterns are too basic to sound any good. Or 3. There is a magic pattern out there somewhere that once found will finally have your fingerpicking sound the way you want it to. None of these myths are true. This is because fingerpicking patterns alone are not musical. They're technical. It's what you do with the patterns that will determine how musical they sound. In this ebook, you learn how to make the most boring fingerpicking patterns sound amazing instantly. Plus, the simple trick to make advanced fingerpicking patterns easier to play, and the thumb and one finger trick that's so simple and will have your fingerpicking sounding pro in no time. Click the link in the description below this video and download your free ebook complete with video examples, 10 melodic fingerpicking patterns you can learn in 10 minutes or less. You'll have it in your inbox within minutes. Let me know in the comment section below what acoustic guitar topics you'd like to see me cover in future videos. Also, let me know about string muting techniques you like to use. Perhaps you have different ways of muting strings. If you like this video, then hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit the all-important notification bell button so YouTube tells you when I've released a new video. This is Simon Candy from acousticguitarlessonsonline.net. As always, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.